when we started homeschooling, especially with our son, it was one of those things where we sat there and we thought for a while, like, how in the hell is he supposed to learn when he's 7 years old, effectively sitting in a classroom for almost 6 hours straight, right? Yeah,
Right.
there's a little break here, a little break there, a little bit activity here, but Tina would do this thing where, like, she'd be going through a subject with Luke, and she could just see he's like antsy, starting to bounce off the walls, and it was like, go outside and run a lap, right? Or it would be like, we're gonna move on to a subject that's gonna let you get outside and do something, or expend some energy and whatnot. And it's not just that Tina wasn't doing that to just cope, right? She wasn't doing that because, oh my gosh, I can't handle this kid right now. She was doing that because, okay, this is an indication that he has energy to get out. Now, are you gonna sit there and demand that he sit there and not do it? Or are you going to provide a positive mechanism and an outlet for that energy? Now, let me caveat one thing here. Yes, all of us need to learn that sometimes you just have to sit there, shut up, and do your thing, right? You got to be disciplined enough to not demand that every time I have energy, I have to be able to go out and disrupt everybody else. No, you got to be disciplined. But by the same token, we're talking about little kids.
Yep.
Right? And especially little boys. I look at the amount of pharmaceuticals we've thrown at little boys in this country because they have a hard time sitting still for 6 hours a day in a classroom. And it's like, you don't think that's going to have greater impacts like on them, on society, where we basically train these little boys that, hey, that need you have to get out, to work, to do something, to lift things, to run, whatever. That's bad. That needs to be, again, chemically suppressed. I mean, it just blows my mind. Blows my mind.
10 years ago, we ran a study at the gym, and I'd have to pull up the exact data because I don't want to speak out of turn, but we ran a study, and we wanted to see what was possible with SAT scores. And so what we did is we had a group of students with SATs, and then what we did is we had them come to the gym, work out, and then study after for the SATs. And we wanted to see how their performance improved. Now, I don't have the exact numbers off the top of my head, and the study was like of 20 kids, so we ended up doing it again. But we saw a dramatic improvement, and it doesn't surprise me, right? It doesn't surprise me, especially for the young boys, where they have this excess energy, they get out this energy, and all of a sudden they're awake, their brain is awake, and their body is calm. And so I think that that's something I've really tried to take in with my son and with my children, in particular my son. Well, both of them. The rule in our house was just, you have to sweat once a day. I don't care what you do. Go find something to do, right?
I love it.
Jump on the trampoline, whatever. But in particular with my son, what I've had to do is like, hey man, like we got to make sure we get out of it, because sometimes he'll go to baseball practice and there's not much activity, and he'll still have some, like, you can just see it. And so we got to make sure we kind of make sure he gets some movement in to act the way I know that he wants to show up for other people.
Well, and I think, Sean Ryan and I were actually talking about this. It was like, it's amazing how I sometimes wonder, and I don't, look, I'm not saying this is an absolute statement. I'm just saying, I wonder how many of the things that we've diagnosed as being problematic that would actually be advantages if you just put it within the right circumstances. It's the old Einstein quote that if you judge a if you judge a fish by how well it can climb a tree, it's going to think it's a failure, right? It's that sort of comparison where you take somebody that's got a lot of energy, or that maybe learns in a particular way, or that can effectively multitask, but you're constantly focusing them to be just focused on one thing. Well, yeah, they're going to feel like they're just a disruptive problem child in one environment, but you move them into another one, and all of a sudden the thing you thought thriving. Was a disability or problem is now a capability. It's just the thing you needed in this other situation. Yeah. And
Matt Boudreau, right?
Anyway.
Matt Boudreau? Yeah. So I love what he's doing. And and I think the practical thing here is that, you homeschooled your kids primarily. My children have not been homeschooled, although I see a lot of value in it. I think that the stigma is evolving, right? Like the stigma used to be, those were the
weirdos.
It used to be the stigma. Now I think that people's eyes are opening up more to what you talked about. There's some people that learn differently. And I think that being open-minded to that, I think, is key. And then there's these hybrid programs, right? Where almost like what Matt has at his academies. But I think that for us, our children are traditional, more private Catholic type school. And so I started asking myself, well, if that's the journey we kind of chose as a family for a variety of reasons, because of whatever, what can I do that's in my control to help support that? Right. And so we try and do a lot of things outside of the class environment, because it does, even though it is quite a bit of the day, it isn't the whole day. And so that's something that's in our control for those people that are listening who maybe have their kids in traditional schools. You know, what else can you be doing before or after school? You know, like we always like to get after it before school, whether that's cold plunging, some type of physical fitness for 15 minutes to kind of set the tone for the rest of the day. And then obviously we try and play a lot of sports after they get out.
Yeah. Well, and I went to, look, my experience was I went to a combination of public school, and then I went to a very, very small Christian school. That's actually where I met my wife too in high school. And look, I had a good experience, right? I had a good experience. And so I think it's always important that people find the thing that works best for them, but also be aware that every single option that you pick is going to come with advantages and disadvantages. The question is that how do you mitigate disadvantages and how do you enhance advantages in order to give the best possible experience? And the involvement is one of the most important things that you can possibly do is being active. I always say that it's like, look, there's a lot of different educational approaches that can work, provided that you recognize that you are still primarily responsible for your kids' upbringing and education. The 100%. Moment you look at it as I have outsourced it to somebody else and this isn't my problem anymore, I don't care what option you choose, it's not going to give them the experience that they need the most. You have to take ownership of it.
I think that when it comes to relationships, you need to be able to show up for your family. Like you have to, and you need to be able to show up composed, detached from your ego, your emotion, you know, if you're taking up some of the stuff from like Echelon Front that they talk about. But I think one of the best ways that I've found to show up best for my wife and, you know, my family is through training hard. Like the thing about it is, I don't know if you feel this sometimes too. And I also think you can get a lot of this from grappling. Have you felt that emotion where like you feel a little anxious, like you feel like you kind of got something brewing in you, like for lack of a better word, testosterone, and you just have to go hit a hard workout or go get crazy on the mats.
Yes.
And all of a sudden you feel a sense of calm and peace. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, absolutely.
I think that when young boys in particular are playing these video games, getting these dopamine fixes and doing all these different things, and they're not exposing themselves to doing hard things that then alleviate that tension, I think that we start to see, you know, kids act out and then in extreme cases do even worse, right? But I think that as a young man or as a man, I think it's really important that if you're finding yourself freaking out on people or not showing up the way you want to be remembered to your family and your friends, like, dude, exercise could be a phenomenal outlet for you. I'm not saying it's going to solve all your problems, but it sure as hell won't hurt.
You are setting yourself up for success in your intellectual pursuits by engaging in fitness pursuits.